Hi there again. Sorry about that, folks. I needed something to put my phone on. So, welcome to our second Facebook Live. I have it up on my screen as well, so I'm going to be able to see your comments and your questions for our session afterwards when we'll have a conversation. But I want to discuss three topics tonight. One, we're going to discuss an update on Elon Musk's Twitter. Number two, we're going to talk about the election briefly. And number three, we're going to talk about Trump running for president and what that means. So let's start off with Elon Musk Twitter. Hi, everyone. Hi. Welcome. So, okay, we spoke last, and you can find the recording from a week ago tonight, Thursday, on my screen. We spoke about Twitter and the concept of Elon Musk having to put the company into bankruptcy. So just as a continuation to that theme and to pick up where we left off, since then, things have gotten more dire. The time of year has passed, within the last week that we spoke, when roughly 30% of the company's revenue comes from booking out long-term advertising. And nominally, because Elon Musk has fired everyone in the advertising department, it's likely that a lot of the long-term advertising that would have been signed at this time of year also didn't happen. As we know, the Twitter Blue verified fiasco happened. So last week we had talked about the concept of how many subscribers he would need to do that. Even if he had 1 million subscribers, it still wouldn't make a dent. But that's now put on hold, and he says he will relaunch that when it's perfect on November 29th. Okay, so that may or may not happen. But needless to say, a week has passed. The revenue situation has not improved. As well, it was reported that a night ago, not last night, but the night before at midnight San Francisco time, Musk sent out an email to all staffers telling them they either had to work extra hard or quit and get 3 months severance pay. And just before I signed on, the deadline was 5 o'clock California time. So that's about an hour ago. So I just checked the media about a few minutes ago before I logged on here. And apparently, as one person has described it, it's a mass exodus again. So just some big picture perspective, the company had roughly 7,500 employees. He fired half. A lot of the big picture, as we talked about, engineers, the senior people have resigned on their own accord. You have an additional exodus, as it was described today. And then to top it all off, next week is the soccer tournament, FIFA tournament, which, according to the articles I've read, is the busiest time of year for Twitter on a worldwide basis. And some of the engineers who have either been fired or have left have said that Musk doesn't understand how the platform actually functions. He might be a brilliant guy, but doesn't understand how it's set up and how it functions. And so this stress on the system could potentially bring it down or bring parts of it down or slow it down. We'll see. That starts on Monday. So you have these dual risks. One is the financial side, and whether he'll just pull the plug and say, I've already sold 4 billion of Tesla stock to fund this thing. I'm already so far underwater, I might as well just walk away. He said this week at a court hearing on an unrelated matter that he's not going to be the CEO of Twitter long term, if there is a long term for Twitter. But he's kind of losing interest. He's sleeping in the office. He's got other responsibilities. Tesla stock is not doing well. SpaceX, if you read the New York Times, his other company, there's a lawsuit coming out of that for him firing employees or employees there being fired. So his plate is full. So you have that side, the financial side, whether he'll dump more stock to put money in. And then you have this other side, which is the technical risk. Like, what's going to happen? Is there going to be a breakdown? Is somebody like an anonymous going to hack the company? Or who knows? More of an issue from the technology standpoint. So net, I continue to say what I said last week, which is if you're like me and you were on Twitter, I had a bigger platform there than I do on Facebook. I had many more followers, and a lot of people are not on Facebook yet. They're trying to find other ways to stay in touch. But if you were one of those people, I would wait it out. Either deactivate your account and you can reactivate, or stay on and just don't go on. You can fill the void very easily. What I've done on my phone is I've downloaded apps where I can get the news. And some are paid subscriptions that I have anyways, like the Washington Post, the New York Times. But others are free. NBC News, ABC News, CNBC is great for financial news for free. So you can fill the gap, which is what a lot of what Twitter has been a way to get news. You can fill that gap pretty easily on your own until the time when we need to find another alternative. But I do believe his time there is not long. He's not going to beat out the head of lettuce for too much longer. So that's Twitter. So we'll discuss all of these things at the end. I sort of want to just give a broad picture on all three. The second I want to talk about is the election results, which we talked about last week, but we didn't know as much as we know now. And first of all, I just want to also tell you, many of you know me from the weekly list, my project of tracking broken norms, and I've kept up with the podcast after that project finished with the listing, just to sort of track our struggles with democracy. So there's going to be, I recorded last night a segment for that. It should be dropping in the next day or two. So if you really want to get in the weeds on that kind of thing about the meaning for democracy, I'll post the podcast when it drops. But in terms of the overview from an activist and how you all know me on here, the election, as I had said to you a week ago Tuesday, it wasn't going to be as bad as the pundits said, and I kind of thought we might keep the Senate, but even I did not know how well we were going to do beyond that. Just some historical perspective, because we controlled the presidency, the House, and the Senate, it's typical. If you look 4 years ago, the Republicans lost 40 seats that we picked up. That is a more typical pattern. In 2010, it was a similar kind of pattern. I think we lost, as Democrats, 56 seats. But anyway, it's very typical for there to be a big election for the party out of power in a midterm election, which is an off-year election. So the fact that we did as well as we did, that we held the Senate, yay, and let's keep working and get to 51. But as well the House. I know some of you were we as Democrats tend to be like, we find things to worry about and whine about, in fairness, come on. But yeah, we didn't hold the House, but they've only thus far picked up 6 seats, 6. Some perspective, folks. In about March, Kevin McCarthy had predicted that the GOP was going to pick up 60 seats, 6-0. They've picked up 6. Even the day before the election, remember Kevin McCarthy had his big shindig plan. They called all the media. They had a stage. They had the champagne going to talk about that night of the election, how they were going to pick up 20 to 25 seats. So far, 6. So they've reached 218, but they've stopped there. We're at, depending which site you look at, 211. There's, I believe, 6 more seats to be called, including Katie Porter. Some of you have been posting about her, but AP and the Times and others haven't called that race. It looks good, but it's not done yet. Anyway, we did great. And more importantly, and this is what I talk about in my podcast, if you've been following me on Facebook or following my work with democracy, my biggest concern was 2022. Trump was installing loyalists with a specific aim of overturning 2024. He was trying to put loyalists into the 6 battleground states: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Georgia. Now, Georgia went through this with their primary. All the Trump-backed candidates lost in their primary. So Georgia ran 3 people that were against Trump what he tried to do in 2020. As we all well know, there's a lawsuit in Georgia, a criminal lawsuit in Fulton County. So Georgia set aside. But let's start the other 5 states. Michigan, woohoo! Not only did we hold governor, attorney general, and secretary of state, in Michigan, there was a total blue tide, took over the House, their state House and their state Senate for the first time in 40 years. In Arizona, you might have heard, we kept the governor's seat. We didn't keep it. We took over the governor's seat, beat a Trump extremist. The only race that's left there to be called is the attorney general. We also won the secretary of state of Arizona, so Arizona will be safe. Wisconsin, we won the governor. We've won the attorney general, and the secretary of state race is still to be called. Pennsylvania, we won governor, and Pennsylvania is a little unusual. In Pennsylvania, the secretary of state does not run for office. The governor appoints the secretary of state, and the attorney general in Pennsylvania is up on presidential year, so we'll be up in 2024. So we're maintaining control in Pennsylvania. Nevada, we did lose the governor's seat, but not to a Trump acolyte. But we have maintained the secretary of state and attorney general. So all in all, of the major election deniers, like the real bad ones that Trump was trying to install to take over our democracy in 2024, only one won, and that was in Indiana, only in terms of in a position where you would determine the vote count and the election results and the reporting of those in the presidential election. So that, to me, of all the things that happened last Tuesday when we showed up, was the most important thing. Because now Trump, if he runs, if he's their candidate, is going to have to win legitimately. My biggest concern, and what I wrote about in the Weekly List website, if you go theweeklylist.org, the article on the front page, was my concern that Trump was going to learn from the mistakes of 2020. There were states like Michigan, which came close. That was the one I was most concerned about, to them actually turning over the results, that he was going to install loyalists that would learn from the mistakes and be able to do it in 2024. But that hasn't happened. So now he's going to have to run as a legitimate candidate. And now we're going to pivot to our third topic. Yes, PA proud. You should be PA proud. Yes, and senator. I didn't even get into the senators, but as I mentioned, we did win the Senate. We have 50 seats. I would like us to get Georgia. Not only would that get us 51, but 2 important things that 51 will do for us. One, Schumer struck a deal with McConnell for the last 2 years because it was 50-50, even though technically we are in control because Kamala Harris is the tiebreaker as a vice president. We struck a deal where we were still committee chairs of all the committees, but they had equal representation. So we couldn't really do that much with the committees. If we get to 51, that deal is off, and Democrats will have more seats on the committees and more power. Of equal importance, it will make either Manchin or Sinema irrelevant. The two of them, the evil duo, sometimes they move against the party together, sometimes they do it separately, but having 51 will nullify one of them. And Kyrsten Sinema is up for re-election in 2024, so is Manchin. But Sinema, especially given how Arizona went in this election, is extremely likely to face a primary challenge. And I think we can topple her. And I think she knows that. So I think she'll be better behaved this time, but we shall see. Okay, so now on to Trump and 2024. And I just want to say up front, I will always tell you guys when I'm really worried. I was worried enough after the 2016 election that I started the Weekly List and spent 4 years of my life documenting broken norms and writing the history of that time. At the end, I was working 60 hours a week because I knew, I could tell in my gut that this guy was an authoritarian and we were in trouble. A year ago, the article on the cover of theweeklylist.org, I wrote it's the same time last year, I was sounding the alarm bells again about what Trump was trying to do to install loyalists in this past midterm, which he didn't do. So my short way of saying, when you all need to be worried, I promise you, I will tell you, time to be worried. Okay? And, I will tell you, we have to work really hard to keep these seats, and we have to, activism, volunteer, phone back. And we did all that stuff. And we did really, really well. I want you all to hold on to that, how well we did versus expectations and how well we did versus historical precedent of what usually happens in these midterms. So hold on to that. And a lot of you, I've seen comments with Trump, are worried, oh, we underestimated him in 2016, and look what happened, and we shouldn't underestimate him this time. It is apples and oranges, folks. He is going to run. Could he be their candidate? It's possible. The dynamics of him entering this time, granted, when he entered last time, no one took him too seriously, but he had an original message that people hadn't heard. I remember the first time I heard him speak, he was talking about the boats off the coast in California with cars that they were bringing in. And it was very populism, and it was very told like a fourth grader. And it was clear he was going to have appeal to people. Now he sounds like a carnival barker. And he doesn't have the money behind him within the GOP. 3 of the billionaires have already said they're not going to support him. A lot of his supporters like Pompeo, Kristi Noem, they have their own political ambitions. Asa Hutchinson, they're already turning on him. So he's going to have a lot of competition. He might survive. He might be their candidate. But folks, let's be realistic. Okay, 2016 is 2016. We've learned our lessons. We're not going to let Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan ever go unwatched again. But look what's happened in the 3 elections since that he's had anything to do with. 2018 was a bloodbath for Republicans. 2020, we won. We got all 3 parts of the government in 2020. And 2022, we just massively overperformed. And the part of the Republican Party that did the worst were the candidates that Trump put forward. People who did win, like Brian Kemp and Raffensperger, were not Trump people. They had to beat Trump people. So, long way of saying, most of the country, like whatever magic he had early on, is gone. And this election was refuting him and caring about democracy and caring about abortion. It was so interesting that our pollsters for months and weeks told us abortion doesn't matter, democracy doesn't matter. Everyone only cares about inflation and the economy. Look at this poll, look at that poll, look at this poll. And then we get to election day and they do the exit polls in Pennsylvania and Michigan, and abortion's number 1. Democracy is number 2. Generation Z is going to show up and vote. Who knew? We all knew. So, long way of saying, those things will still be in play as we come into 2024. My view on Trump is let him stick around. Let him destroy DeSantis. And that's what he'll do next. He's, if you've heard the expression useful idiot, let him be our useful idiot. I also, I believe that we will see potentially some indictments of him in the next year. Now, the election has passed, so those might, I don't have the greatest level of confidence in Merrick Garland, but I have more confidence in the Attorney General in Fulton County and in Tish James in New York, that we might see some repercussions. And he might be wrapped up in even more of these indictments. Like, hopefully we'll get something out of our Attorney General. So that's going to happen. And DeSantis, we'll have to see how it plays out. But as someone who's been involved in politics for a long time, I will just tell you, almost without exception, the shiny object for either party 2 years before very, very rarely turns out to be the candidate. They're at this point, DeSantis is this unbesmirched, you don't know anything bad about the guy, right? I mean, he's, other than his policies, which if you disagree, that part is bad, but you don't know anything bad about him personally. You're going to hear bad things. The Republicans will destroy him for us before we even need to get to him. It will probably be somebody else. You can replay this in a year and a half and you'll see if I'm right or not. But most likely it's going to be another candidate. But for now, again, let Trump be our useful idiot. If he wins the primary, that's fine. We've done this before. He will drive our base to the poll. He will drive independents to the poll, and he'll have to win legitimately because of what we just did again. Thank you. So with that, I just want to close out by saying if you have any questions, I have my computer, so I should be able to get in, but you might have to, if you have questions, write them as a comment. I see a lot of comments, but it's probably better if you have a question to write it now again, so it'll be freshening up at the top of my feed. But we're discussing 3 topics again. Again, the 3 topics are, and if you want to ask questions about Death DeSantis and Trump and what's going on next. We talked about the election results, and we talked about Elon Musk's Twitter. So I cannot get to your old comments. So if you have a question, now is the time to write it as a comment. I've thought the same thing, but Kemp really didn't like how Trump attacked him. Yes, and Kemp had a primary challenge, as did Ratzenberger, by Trump picked candidates and they lost. And the QAnon people, Boebert, we still have to find out her results, but she went from winning by 8 points to it being basically tie. Marjorie Taylor Greene won, but by 5 fewer points. And Majerski lost his seat in Ohio. So the real extremists are either gone or they did not perform well. Elon's Musk. The lettuce may outlast Elon, yes. I am worried about DeSantis. People are hardcore supporters of him. He will appeal to independents. We love to worry as Democrats. Feel free to worry away. I can't stop you. I'm just saying the history of how candidates play out is usually someone who's super popular and doesn't have anything bad known about them 2 years in advance. Once they get tarnished, do not stick around. But it could be DeSantis. And I'm sure that Trump will start to destroy him too. Get rid of James Jordan in Ohio. Can't do it. I mean, his district is way too red. What are your thoughts? How important is AG race in Arizona? I think I just lost. Oh, in Arizona. Yeah, important. All of those races in Arizona, it's, I think, like a few thousand votes now separate them. The fact that we have governor and secretary of state makes me feel better, but yes, we absolutely do want to. Mastodon, I have tried it and it's still too quirky for me, and the number of people are way too small. Like, I mean, for me, most of the people, I'm not saying this in an egotistical way, I'm just saying it as a factual way. I had 560,000 followers on Twitter. All of Mastodon, I think, has like 100,000 now. It's just really small. People ultimately might go there and it might grow, but I think right now, if you want to go and get involved, I think fine. I haven't heard anything bad about it. Facebook is probably better for activism and stuff. And then just, you can go there and just be patient until Elon Musk blows up his version of Twitter and we can go back. Oh, Boebert is an automatic recount. She was leading by, but not much. I don't know if they've declared that, but if it's within 0.75%. How does the House going to Republicans make Biden a lame duck? To be determined. He was already kind of a lame duck with, I think Schumer is kind of a weak leader in the Senate. So we were already kind of that way because of the Senate. It's really to be determined. The people who just won as Republicans, a lot of them won by very slim margins. And don't forget, they have to run again in 2024. So you might see more rational Republicans break when you have that close of a balance. Again, right now it's 211 to 218. It probably will be closer. Republicans will probably be up by, a handful of seats or less. So there's going to be some wiggle room for them to pass things on a bipartisan basis. And I think all the ridiculousness about the Hunter Biden stuff and stuff, if they want to do that, go for it. They'll get punished for it in 2024. But I don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But I just, we have to see as it gets started. They're definitely not going to cooperate. Kevin McCarthy has the ability to bring things to the floor or not, so things will be harder. But there are ways around it, and there's potentially some bipartisan thing that can get passed. Schumer is weak. I've been saying this. I mean, he's my senator since 2020. He's a lovely man. He just won New York by 13 points, which is barely winning in New York. We did not have a good showing in New York. I wish he would step aside. We need I've been saying this since last time, a wartime concierge, and he's not that person. The marriage equality thing was bipartisan. Yes, they do know they have to get things done or they're going to get creamed. I mean, I think that's an important takeaway in what I was trying to get at the House, that don't forget, unlike the Senate, where a third of them roll off every 2 years, everyone in the House of Representatives has to run every election. And they all saw what just happened with Roe v. Wade. And that's why I'm sure that you saw them pass to the next step on gay marriage and interracial marriage, because that will be an issue in 2024 for the Republican Party if they don't get their ass in gear, and it will drive the young voters to the polls again. No, I'm not that person, but thank you. I like him, but we need someone more assertive. Yes. What happened in New York? Okay. I'm going to give you guys the lowdown in New York, a short version of it, because I'm in the weeds in New York. The short version is Governor Hochul's campaign, non-campaign. Worst campaign I've ever seen in my life for a major campaign. Was non-existent, didn't have any ground game, no lawn signs, no phone banking, no door knocking, no nothing. New York is 2-1 Republicans to Democrats. I think they assumed she had so much money that they could just run commercials and that would be all they would need. I was out knocking doors on Long Island for one of the seats that we lost 4 weeks before the election. And I came back and I sounded the alarm with the lower level people that I could reach in her campaign. Went back the next weekend and said, someone put me through to the campaign manager. And I spoke to him. And I told him, this is political malpractice. You are going to bring down all these other candidates because they have a negative impression of Hochul and you're not out there at all. So ultimately, in the last week and a half, they did listen to advice that I was giving them and others were giving them. I told them they had to get out these seas of blue in the lower part of the state, New York City, Westchester County, where I live. And ultimately, she just eked it out. She won by 5 points. Schumer won by 13 points. But the problem was, if you go to a state like I did and you go to Pennsylvania and you see how well things are organized and how pumped up everyone is, you knock on a door. I could tell Fetterman, if you want to know why I knew Fetterman was going to win, because people there were so enthused. I would knock on a door and somebody would say, not only am I voting for Fetterman and the local candidate who I was knocking doors for, who actually turned an assembly seat, not only am I voting for them, but I have Parents' Weekend this weekend. I'm bringing a ballot to my daughter in college to make sure she signs it and she sends it in. They were really pumped up. You ring doorbells on Long Island, they say, we're upset about Hochul. We're upset about crime. We're upset about Biden. And they loved the candidate, the local candidate. He got all the endorsements, including from Republican newspapers that haven't endorsed a Democrat since the 1940s. But they wanted to send a message. And Hochul wasn't there. There was no show of her, nothing to counter what they were hearing, the negative stuff about Biden or Hochul. So it was a bloodbath in Long Island. It was a bloodbath in nearby for us when Sean Patrick Maloney lost. But that's the longer story about what happened in New York. What the heck happened? Yeah, I mean, can they change the filibuster? So that's why this 51st seat is so important. I'm glad you asked. So when we tried to codify Roe, in the last session, what happened was, in order to take the next step, you either need to get 60 votes to advance it, or you need to carve out the filibuster to advance it. Mind you, the Republican Party carves out the filibuster. That's how we have Supreme Courts being pushed, three Supreme Court nominees pushed through with 50 votes. Mitch McConnell did that. In that case, Kyrsten Sinema was willing to go along with the Democrats. We had 49. The one person that held that up was Joe Manchin, which is why it's so important we win Georgia. Because if we win Georgia, we will have that 50 votes needed to carve the filibuster and bring that forward for a vote. So that's an example of why Georgia is so important. On the defense, no by 24, Dems will show how racist and hateful the GOP are. I know, but that's not anything new. They pride themselves on that. I asked everyone, I did your 10 a day rule. Baristas, everyone probably lost some friends but hell, we did it. Yes, thank you. I'm telling you, I mean, a lot of people are taking a lot of credit for how well we did, but it's really us, the activists, that turned out our friends. And we had a really strong turnout, not in New York, where Zeldin people were super, we had such a great showing, but in other states. Yes, I haven't forgot Sinema. Why didn't Stacey Abrams win? I think Georgia, in that particular case, people liked their governor, and it's more of a red-leaning state by slightly. And he stood up to Trump. It was hard. It's easier to beat the Trump extremists that embraced the election denial and all the rest, and he didn't do that. So he took away that edge of the democracy fight. And I think that was why. Herschel Walker, there's a lot of comparisons. Obviously, Herschel Walker is a much weaker candidate to run against than a sitting governor who's popular with the Republican base. So of course, she was not going to do as well as Warnock, who's already a sitting senator and has already proved himself. Aside from, what do you think the Republican House is going to look like for working with the Senate? I really do believe, hopefully these last 6 seats, like Katie Porter, if her race gets called, we'll be at 212. There's 3 more seats that we could win. I think if it's within a few votes, I think the Republicans are going to be reluctant to, when Kevin McCarthy had his 60-seat vision, and then his 25-seat vision, and then his 20-seat vision, and then he had the empty stage and the champagne, on ice that melted. I think they've come back to reality, and I don't think that, time will tell, but I don't think they're going to be as crazy as they would have been if they picked up 20 seats. They're not going to get away with it, because the ones who go along with it are going to have to run again. And, they saw in this last election, people do not want that. People want to get things done. People don't want the extremism on either side. So it might not be as bad as we think. Why hasn't Merrick Garland moved forward with indicting Trump? Really disappointing. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I've been disappointed in Merrick Garland. The lawyers tell me, just wait, he's doing it. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, but it's disappointing. Hi. Herschel is a weak candidate. Yes. Does anyone else have questions? Did they cut the head of the snake? Lake. We're not done with her. And the neat thing was, I covered this in my podcast, Trump is not on Twitter yet, but on Trump Social, sent out 20 tweets during Election Day and after, disputing election results, starting with one on Michigan about problems with Michigan, and Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson then cut it out, put it on Twitter and said, this is not true. he did the same stuff that he did, but it's sort of like people are inoculated to it, which is another reason I feel better about 2024. That, Trump and Carrie Lake were doing their crazy, crazy stuff. Uh, and I wasn't as worried about this election. I mean, even in Arizona, believe it or not, it was the League of Women Voters who were the ones that filed the lawsuit to get the people with the guns away from the drop boxes. But there was, and at the night that Maricopa County was giving the last vote dump that then gave Hobbs the win, they had like armed security at Maricopa's counting facility and all that. They were expecting the worst. But I just think it's different. I think we've lived through it. There are election deniers. Most of them lost. If you were in a safe red district, I think about 100 some odd of them did win, but none of the ones that did win are in a position where they can overturn the election. They're just, in regular positions. Peter sent me a message separately. Do you see Tim Ryan as a national candidate? Oh, that hurt my heart. That hurt my heart. And I did speak to some of the people in his campaign after, and he's so good. I had him at my house, and he's totally not my brand. I usually have, my first priority is women of color or LGBT women or other women candidates or men of color. So like a white guy from the Midwest wasn't necessarily my brand, but I'll tell you, he totally won me over. And his way of talking about issues, and I was heartbroken that he lost. Same thing for Sherry Beasley. Those were two candidates that were really strong candidates in their state, where the Republican PACs literally threw $50 million of money at them at the end to win those races. And for whatever reason, Schumer and gang didn't want to fund those races. I just want to make a differentiation between, we don't want Biden to come to our state in Ohio because he wasn't popular at that time, versus we don't want money. Those are two different things. He needed the money. He raised a shitload of money, and J.D. Vance didn't raise much money at all. But at the end, they threw in $50 million of ads. It was like ad. So my wish list for Tim Ryan, because, who's up next in Ohio? Unfortunately, it's Sherrod Brown. So he's not going to run against Sherrod Brown. And there's already a already a Democrat that's governor in Ohio. So my short-term wish list for him in this order, this is Amy Siskins, I'm going to speak to him, I'm told. He's going to call me, but I haven't spoken to him yet. But this is my wish list. Number one, to be the DNC chair, because Jamie Harrison, I think, was a subpar DNC chair. Like, what happened to Jamie Harrison? Was he anywhere? And where was the messaging? I think Tim would be great in coming up with a Midwest kind of message that could work for a lot of parts in the country. And we need to stop seeding these blue collar voters, because our message is better. We just don't tell it well. And my second choice is that he joins the Biden administration. And those are my wish lists. I don't know what his is. I expected Val Demings to do better. Yes. Okay. So my philosophy, and I have to tell you, Val Demings came to my home, and I had friends say to me, she's a better speaker than even Obama. If you meet her in person, oh my God, this woman is so good. And she is a political, superstar, and I guarantee you we haven't seen the end of Val Demings. Total superstar. My view with the Senate, because I've been working on the Senate for the last 2 years, is bring in your best athletes. I mean, Sherry Beasley, Val Demings, Tim Ryan, we use the term great athletes, and just have them there. Now, if the world had gone differently, if we weren't in a period where inflation, for whatever reasons, we can have a whole other talk about what happened with inflation in the economy. But if we were in a different place and the economy was stronger, if Biden's approval was 60% instead of 40%, and Biden was a positive thing, those are seats we could have won. It's really hard to win seats in states. Whoops. It's hard to win seats in states that lean red when everything against you in the national conversation is negative. So I think it's important because I'm starting to think about 2024. I've already had my first candidate who's running in 2024 for Senate, or people have already reached out about doing a fundraiser. I'm like, can we just get through this? Can we finish this? But I think it's really important to have all these superstars running because you don't know. In a different environment, all three of those candidates could have won. And they're all future superstars in other capacities. They're all, they're young enough that they'll be back. But Val broke my heart because yes, I loved her. She's a great candidate. She's got a great life story. We're not done with her yet. Florida is going more and more ultra conservative. I mean, these states, listen, they go here and there. I mean, I've heard Charlie Crist was not a great candidate either, that because he was a Republican and a recycled candidate. But yeah, I kind of stopped focusing on Florida because it was a lost cause. Sure, it's a national treasure. Yeah, and he's going to run again, and unless he runs for president or something and vacates that seat, that's not a seat for Tim. The future is bright, and we make rain and lemons out of lemonade out of lemons. And Roe, as bad as what happened, turning back 50 years. So we're engaged, and we should never let them control the presidency or the Senate again. The Senate is how you get to the Supreme Court. Didn't the hurricane have something to do with the turnout? I don't know. I kind of, okay. Joe came and saved us. Helsinki was his breaking point. I think Joe Biden has been an excellent president, but he didn't save us in this election. We saved us in this election. He was a weight for a negative for most of the candidates running, because in most states he would drag them down. In a state like New York, he could come. He came to Westchester County the Sunday before. Here, he could help. But a lot of places, he isn't responsible for this win. We as activists are responsible. We do hope they'll run again. So it's 9:45. I will take one more question. If anyone has a question that they want to leave, either on Elon Musk or on Trump 2024, we've talked a lot about the election. If anyone has questions, a last question about Twitter. If not, I'm just going to kind of close it out to just say, be patient with Twitter. I think if we have this conversation by the end of the year, it either will be, again, as I talked about in the beginning, it's going to be one of two things. It's either going to be a financial issue or technology kind of issues. I don't believe it's going to be Elon Musk Twitter for much longer. So hang there, and we'll go back when the time is right. The game plan is to just watch it happen from the sideline and wait for it to combust and wait for Elon Musk to move away and for responsible adults to take over, and then we go back. Yeah, I don't think we can appreciate. It's not all redistricting. It was just, we did really great given the odds. We just did really great, and take that in. We did really, really great. You should all be really proud of yourselves. We didn't win the House. We also didn't lose the House by 60 votes like they thought we would. So, okay, everyone. I just want to say goodnight. Depending on how the week goes, next week is Thanksgiving. If there's a lot of news, I'll try to do one earlier in the week, or else we'll catch up after Thanksgiving. So if I don't speak to you, have a great Turkey Day, and we will all talk soon. Take care.